Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Okay. In the last class, we studied aggregate expenditure model. Aggregate expenditure model. This model developed by Keynes. He is a economist, British economist. He developed this model during the Great Depression in UK, England. So it was very severe recession before Second World War. So he developed the model, this aggregate expenditure model, to so then the policy makers, government, they use this model to recover from the recession. So this model suggests the government what they should do to recover from the recession. So he developed the model. So aggregate expenditure model. So that means expenditure, you studied earlier, expenditure equal income. So all the expenditure. So expenditure means consumption, household spend. So that is consumption expenditure. In private business, they purchase goods, capital goods, that is investment. And government purchase goods and services. So that is government expenditure. And we export, that is, and also we import. So the amount we produce within the country, that is real GDP, equal to the expenditure on the goods and services produced within the country. So the aggregate expenditure. So that is that we export and also we import. So the amount we spend, export minus import, that is our product. That we import, that is not the product produced within our country. So the real GDP equal to the consumption expenditure, household consumption expenditure, business investment, government purchase goods and services, and export minus import, net export. So we deduct the import because that is not produced country. So first we assume there is no government, no export import, no trade with other country. So that is private closed economy. Closed mean no export import. Private mean no government. So then in the private closed economy, only households and firm. So then household expenditure, that is consumption expenditure, firm expenditure, that is investment. So consumption. So in the first class, we studied the basic relationship between disposable income, consumption, and saving. Then we convert that disposable relationship between disposable income to consumption. We convert real GDP and consumption. Same relationship. So real GDP and saving. So we studied that consumption schedule, saving schedule with the real GDP. Real GDP in horizontal axis, vertical axis, consumption, expenditure and saving. So both are positively sloped. So consumption schedule and saving schedule. So then we studied investment demand curve, relationship between investment and the interest rate, expected rate of return or real interest rate. So that investment demand curve show different interest rate, the level, amount of the investment. So in the higher interest rate, only few project will be birth. In the lower interest rate, they can invest in the many project because the lower interest rate, then the return from the project will cover that interest rate. Then that project is profitable. If he can borrow loan at the lower interest rate, we can borrow and invest, and the return may be higher than this lower interest rate. Then we can repay, then we can get profit. If we can borrow money at the higher interest rate, then only few projects will give return to cover that higher interest rate. So then they will invest less. Only few projects will be profitable. But in the lower interest rate, many projects. So investment demand curve, downward slope. Then investment schedule. Investment schedule, investment relationship between real GDP and investment. So particular interest rate, certain level of investments. Here 8% interest rate, 20 billion they business firms totally can invest. So then whatever the real GDP, if the interest rate 8%, investment is 20 billion. So then the relationship between real GDP and investment is a horizontal line at the 20 billion. So if the interest rate change, this will shift upward or downward. But at the 8%, the investment schedule is constant any real GDP. With the real GDP, investment will not change. Only interest rate change, but consumption will change with the real GDP. If the real GDP increase, consumption increase. So consumption schedule, so positively slow, but investment schedule the parallel, no slope. So in the private closed economy, consumption and investments are there only. So aggregate expenditure, total spending equal to the consumption plus investment. So that is then aggregate expenditure, consumption plus investment, then income, real GDP. So real GDP equal to the, so expenditure equal to the income. That is the one you studied in the circular flow of the economy. Household. So two approach we studied to measure the GDP. So one is expenditure, other one income. So expenditure equal to the GDP, real GDP. So at the equilibrium, real GDP equal to the aggregate expenditure. So equilibrium GDP, aggregate expenditure, consumption and investment spending at each level of output. That is aggregate expenditure schedule. That is C plus IG for the private closed economy. Equilibrium GDP, level of output where total spending is just enough to clear the output. So that means total spending, aggregate expenditure equal to the production, real output, real GDP. So real GDP equal to the total spending. That is happen when aggregate expenditure schedule cross that 45-degree line. Total goods produced is exactly equal to the total goods purchased. So disequilibrium, any other real GDP, the disequilibrium occurs where spending is greater than output and the market clear faster than production, or when output is greater than the spending, then leaves unsold stock of the goods. So the expenditure model. So this is consumption schedule we studied then earlier. With the consumption, we had planned investment. So at a particular interest rate, now interest rate we say 8%. So the investment plan, investment IG. So then aggregate expenditure schedule curve like this. So upward shift of the consumption schedule by investment. So C plus IG. So here the aggregate expenditure schedule cross the 45-degree line. So here the horizontal axis is real GDP. That is the level of production. Now they produce 470. Aggregate expenditure also 470. So total spending equal to the production. So total purchase, aggregate expenditure, total purchase equal to the total produced. So when the aggregate expenditure schedule cross the 45-degree line, then the horizontal distance, that is amount produced, equal the vertical distance, that is purchased. So produced equal purchase. So expenditure equal to the produced. So this is equilibrium point. So anything below this equilibrium GDP, so 470 is equilibrium GDP. 410 mean we produce less, but so then our expenditure is more than we produced. So more than we produce. If the real GDP is below, actual GDP is below 470, then our expenditure more than we produce. 45-degree line, so the amount we produce. But if below this equilibrium GDP, the expenditure greater than the real production. So this equilibrium we borrow to this meet the aggregate expenditure. But beyond this, above this 470, the production, the 45-degree line, so the amount we produce. But the expenditure, total spending below that. So we produce more than purchase. So what will happen? If we produce more than purchase, then the inventories. So the store, the inventory level goes up. Here, with the below equilibrium GDP, expenditure more than the production. So sale more. So then inventory, the business store inventory level decrease because sale more than the production. So then they will produce more and reach the equilibrium. If the sale more to maintain the inventory level, the firm will produce. Then they reach the equilibrium. If anything above the equilibrium level, then the sale is less than the production. The expenditure less than the production. Then inventory goes up. Then business firm cut down the production. Then again they reach the equilibrium and the production cut. So at the equilibrium, saving equal plan investment. So here consumption plus investment. This C plus IG. Here this IG mention plan investment, not the actual investment. So they plan at this interest rate. This is the amount they plan to maintain the inventory. They plan according to the sale. They plan. They expect this much sale. Then to maintain certain inventory in the store and expecting the certain level of sale, then they decide the production to maintain the inventory and meet the sale demand. So inventory, not that is plan investment. So at the equilibrium, as they plan, they invest. So when a consumer, then in the real GDP is spent for consumption plus saving. So the real GDP equal consumption plus saving. At the equilibrium, the consumption plus plan investment. So at the equilibrium, plan investment equal to the saving because no change in the inventory. So then the saving equal to the planned investment. So at the equilibrium, investment that the difference between these two lines, consumption plus investment. So that investment, plan investment equal to the saving. Then only the real GDP equal to the consumption plus saving. So at the equilibrium, aggregate expenditure, consumption plus plan investment. At the equilibrium, consumption plus saving. So consumption plus saving is the income. That is real GDP. Consumption plus saving is the real GDP. So the real GDP, household consume certain portion and certain portion they save. So real GDP, that income equal consumption plus saving. Here at the equilibrium, consumption plus plan investment. So at the equilibrium, when the aggregate expenditure model crosses the 45-degree line, consumption plus saving, that is real GDP, equal to the consumption plus plan investment, aggregate expenditure. Consumption plus investment is the aggregate expenditure. Real GDP is consumption plus saving. Both are equal at the equilibrium. Real GDP equal aggregate expenditure. Both side consumption is there. Then the other component saving equal plan investment. At the equilibrium, saving equal to the plan investment. Saving is leakage. The circular flow. So if the expenditure equal consumption, then that is always, but from this circular flow, saving leakage, that is not consumed. So consumption plus equal expenditure, then if the consumption go as a saving, that is leakage from this economy circular flow. But this saving again come into this circular flow as a investment. Again, it's come into the circular flow by firm business as investment. So that is injection. So saving goes out, leakage, then it come as a investment, as a injection to into this economy. So then we call saving is a leakage, investment is injection. So say at the equilibrium, saving equal planned investment, not the actual investment, planned investment. So leakage causes consumption to be less than total GDP. Total GDP is the income. So that, but consumption is less than the total income. So that saving is, it sets that pace for decline in total output. If we save more and reduce consumption, then the income increase, decline. So injection, this is investment and potentially replaces the leakage caused by saving. So in the equilibrium, saving equal planned investment. So the saving, the leakage equal to the injection. So no, then at the equilibrium, no unplanned changes in inventories. So in the business sector, no change in the inventory level because now at the equilibrium, that is the saving equal plan investment. So the plan investment. So the saving equal plan investment, then there will not be any change in the inventory. No unplanned changes in inventory. So this indicates that equilibrium level. If there is no unplanned changes in the inventory, the equilibrium, we can say economy is in equilibrium. The sale as expected, so they plan investment. So now the level of inventories in the business sector is same. So no unplanned changes in inventories, then economy is at the equilibrium level. That means GDP production, real output equal consumption, aggregate expenditure, consumption plus investment. So real GDP equal aggregate expenditure. The amount purchased equal the amount produced. So saving equal plan investment. So here there are only one schedule is there, consumption plus investment. So initially, so C plus IG 0. The initially the aggregate expenditure, this red line. So if there is increase in the investment, so aggregate expenditure model shift up. If C plus IG increase, so then equilibrium will be. So if this is for the particular this aggregate expenditure schedule, this is equilibrium. So if there is if real GDP is more than the equilibrium, so 490, now we produce 490. So the 45-degree line shows we produce 490. But the aggregate expenditure, the red line, that is expenditure. So we produce more, expenditure is less. Then what will happen to the inventory? So we produce more, but we spend this amount. So then increase in the inventories. So then there will be unplanned changes in the inventories. If we produce more than the expenditure, so income more, real GDP, that is the amount we produce. So income, it's more than the plan, the aggregate expenditure. So there will be a increase in the inventories, that is unplanned changes in inventories. If there is unplanned changes in the inventories, inventory level goes up, then firm start to cut the production. So then again they reach the equilibrium 470. the total production, the economy decrease because all the firm feel there is a unplanned changes in the inventories level goes up, then they cut down the production, then again they reach the equilibrium. At the equilibrium, the expenditure, the plan investment equal to the saving. Here in 490, saving more than the plan investment. Saving because they produce this amount, that is real GDP. They spend less. So then saving this aggregate expenditure schedule include planned saving. Now actual saving more than the, so they save more than the plan investment. But here equilibrium saving equal plan investment. Below this equilibrium, we produce this amount, but expenditure more. So then more sale, expenditure more than the production. So sale of the more. Then firm C, their inventory level goes down. So there is a, then they started to produce more to maintain the inventory. So there is a unplanned changes in inventories. So inventory level go down, unplanned changes in inventory. So then they will produce more, then they reach the equilibrium 470. So this is private closed economy. The private closed economy, what is happening at the equilibrium? What the firm plan equal to the saving. So the all the saving go to the okay. Now we studied private closed economy. No government, no trade. Now we will include into this model trade. If the country can export and import, so international trade. So we consider net export, export minus import. So that is the amount that we spend on the product in the consumption we spend on the domestically produced goods. So we don't consider in this model the goods produced in another country. So import. So we deduct the import. So the export, even the foreigners consume our product, that is we produce in our country. So export, that is produce that goods, export goods produced in our country. So we should consider that. So net export and agreement. So export increase domestic production, employment and income. So export increase the domestic production, employment. If we want to produce more, we should employ more people, and the income also increase. So aggregate expenditure for privately closed economy is C plus I. Now private open economy, that is C plus the private closed economy, C plus I. So the net export. So net export schedule, export at each level of GDP. So there can be positive net export, negative net export. If the export greater than import, then positive net export. So if the private closed economy C plus IG, with that we add the another expenditure component, net export. So if that economy export greater than import, so then net export is positive, then the expenditure model shift up. So C plus I G plus net positive net export. So C plus IG expenditure model shift upward with the positive net export. If the net export is negative, then the expenditure model below the private closed economy. Private closed economy C plus IG. If we open the economy, we import more than export, then our expenditure model will be below the private closed economy because negative net export. So then our real GDP decline. If it is positive net export, then our expenditure model shift up, then real GDP increase. So you know, when the expenditure model shift upward or downward, the real GDP increase more than that or decrease more than that because of multiplier effect. With the consumption schedule, our expenditure schedule shift upward 5 million, then that expenditure model cross the 45-degree line at the 20 million real, more 20 million GDP level. So if the aggregate expenditure model shift upward 5 million, the real GDP increase by 20 million. That is this expenditure model curve cross that 45-degree line at the 20 million more. That is multiplier effect. We studied earlier. If investment increase 5 million, then that investment goes to others as a income. So income increase 5 million. If the income increase 5 million, so 75%, 3.75% goes again consumption. So that 3.75 million some will receive, that is income for them. Then they use that income to purchase. And from that 3.75 million, 75% they consume, 25% saving. Then others get this spending as a income. Then others in their income, 25% they save, 75% they spend the Then like this goes until there is no further increase in the income and consumption or saving. So it reached the equilibrium. That 4 times than the initial change in the aggregate expenditure. So if we add investment, then we can see the real GDP happen 4 times the change in the investment. Like that, net export increase, then we can expect 4 times than the increase in the net export. Like that, if a decrease negative, then if the 5 million decrease in the net export, then real GDP decrease by 20 million. Multiplier effect is there. So this net export depend on other factors. So net export, import depend on other factors. Prosperity abroad. So we are exporting. So the import countries economy grow, their prosperity increase. So then they will import more. If their economy grow well or expand, their income increase, then they will import more. That means our export increase. And tariff. If the import country, the restrict, increase the tax for our export product. So they are importing. So they tax more, then our export decrease because they increase the tax in their country. So now the price in their country for our product increase. So the consumer will not import much. So if, for example, we are importing vehicle, if we increase the tax, we will not import more vehicle. So like that, we are exporting textile, tea. If the importing countries increase the tax for our export, for their import product, then our export decline. So net export effect. The exchange rate. If other countries, importing countries, their money value increase, then they will import more. They are now the dollar value increase, then they import more because now our product become cheaper for them. Earlier $1 they purchase certain amount. Now their value increase, the same $1, now they can buy more our product if our currency depreciate. So export will increase. The opposite, import. So prosperity, tariff, exchange rate. So prosperity of importing countries increase, our export increase. If their prosperity down, then our export decline. If the importing countries impose higher tax for our product, then our export decrease. If they reduce the tax, then our export increase. Like that, their currency value increase, foreign currency value increase, they import more, our export increase. Their currency value decrease, then our product become expensive for them. Then our export decrease. So international economic linkage. So net export depend on prosperity abroad, tariff, and exchange rate. So in the private closed economy, aggregate expenditure model C plus IG. If the net export positive, then this aggregate expenditure model shift up. Here the graph didn't show that up and down graph, but you can see C plus IG X. So when we add net export into our aggregate expenditure model, then equilibrium GDP increase. If negative net export, then aggregate expenditure model below our private closed economy, so real GDP decline. So some countries has positive so you can see in 2004 some countries has positive net export, some are negative. Always United USA always negative net export. So they import more than they export. So Japan positive net export, Germany positive net export, Canada positive, France negative, Italy negative, UK negative, USA negative. So you should not think if it is negative export, is no, the economy is not the good economy. They import cheaper product and their welfare increase. So they are USA import from China, the cheapest one, then consume more. Then their welfare more. They consume more. But we should not think negative net export, then their economy is not, their country is not in the high welfare, like that. We should not think. So they consume more by importing cheaper product, but their economy is large economy. So their citizen welfare high level. So then now we include government. So earlier private closed economy, then private open economy. Now we include government. So public sector, we include public sector government. So government purchase goods and services. So if there is a government in the country, the government also purchase and goods. So if there is change in the government purchase and goods, so then equilibrium level change, equilibrium PLG. So if there is a government, then they purchase goods and services. To purchase, they need money. Where they get money? From tax. So if there is a government, then there will be a tax, and also they will spend by goods and services. So then two component is coming, new component, government purchase and taxes. So the middle line, the lower consumption schedule, then consumption investment plus net export. Now we add consumption investment net export plus government expenditure. So expenditure model, aggregate expenditure schedule, shift upward. So if they shift upward, you can see real equilibrium increase. So earlier 470, now government spending increased 20 million. If we add government expenditure, then real GDP increase. So from 470 to 558. So multiplier is 4. So in our example, multiplier is 4 because 75% consume. In any change in the income, 75% consume. So then any change in the aggregate expenditure increase the real GDP 4 times. So 20 million increase due to the government spending, then real GDP increase 4 times 2080. So now equilibrium GDP 550. So when adding, so here in this expenditure model, we assume lump sum tax. So lump sum tax, that not the with the whatever the real GDP. Whatever the real GDP, the tax is same. So lump sum tax, for easiness to explain that, we assume lump sum tax. Earlier also when we add net export also, we assume a constant. So that means with the real GDP, we don't change the net export. So for the explain simply this relationship, we assume net export is same for any real GDP. So the parallel shift. The aggregate expenditure, you can see a parallel shift upward when we add net export. That means any real GDP net export is same like investment. So only consumption schedule is slope upward. Only consumption has positive relationship with the real GDP. Other investment, net export, the government expenditure, or lump sum tax, all we assume a constant. With the real GDP, they are not changed except consumption. Then we can easily explain what is happened to the economy. So we simplify to explain some relationship. So, but in the real world, it's not like that. So, but here we assume, so net export also, if real GDP increase, normally we import more. If our economy improve more, we got more income, then import will increase. But here we assume net export minus import is constant to explain easily. So here, so government expenditure increase, then 4 times the real GDP. So, and also the tax is lump sum tax. This is the first graph. So if the government spending increase, government expenditure increase 20 billion, what will happen to the equilibrium real GDP? Increase by 80. Now, if there is government tax also there, so government impose tax. So that is lump sum tax. So a certain total tax. So it's same for any real GDP, any production level. So if we see 50 billion, if there is a tax, lump sum tax 20 billion. So earlier we saw 20 million increase government expenditure. Then we saw 80 million increase in the real GDP, 4 times. Now, if the tax increase 20 billion, like earlier case, 20 million expenditure, government expenditure, now 20 billion tax, lump sum tax. If government impose 20 million tax, then the income decrease by 20 billion. In the income, when the income decrease 20 billion, consumption decrease by 15 million, saving decrease by 5 billion. When the government impose tax 20 billion, so then saving and the consumption decrease by 15 billion, saving decrease by 5 million. So consumption plus saving. So if the government impose 20 billion lump sum tax, consumption decrease by 15 million. So the consumption is the component in the aggregate expenditure schedule. So then aggregate expenditure schedule shift down by 15 billion dollar, not the 20 million. If the government impose 20 million lump sum tax, that affect the expenditure schedule 15 million down. Then if the 15 million down shift, then real GDP decline by 4 times, 60 million. So 60 million real GDP. So you can see government expenditure affect 4 times the real GDP, but lump sum tax affect the real GDP not 4 times. So government expenditure, any changes in the government expenditure change the real GDP, in this case 4 times. But tax, the same amount tax. So government expenditure 20 billion, lump sum tax 20 billion has less effect than the government expenditure 20 billion in the real GDP, because in the tax change in the consumption 50 million, not 20 billion. So 50 million, 15 billion multiplied by 4, 60 million change. So the effect is not like same. So adding public sector government. So now aggregate expenditure have 4 components: consumption, investment, net export, plus government expenditure. So that is total spending equal to the real GDP at the equilibrium point. Then this expenditure schedule cross the 45-degree line. That is the equilibrium point. That equilibrium point, consumption plus investment plus net export plus government expenditure equal to GDP. In other point, that is not equilibrium. If the real GDP more than that equilibrium or less than this equilibrium real GDP, that is disequilibrium point. So in the private closed economy, we saw the consumption. So here GDP equal, the GDP is used for consumption and saving. So C plus I X the net export plus government expenditure equal GDP. That is GDP equal C plus S. So both side consumption is there. So the saving is equal to the IXG. So saving is leakage. Then this at the equilibrium GDP, this saving equal to the leakage, investment, government expenditure, and net export. So leakage is saving. So in the net export, we have export and import. So export minus import. So if we bring the import other side, so the consumption plus investment plus export plus government expenditure equal consumption plus saving plus import. So net export has two components, export minus import. So if we bring the import other side, then plus. So one side, both side consumption cancel. So other side saving plus import, that is leakage. Investment, export is injection. So leakage, saving, import. If there are tax, that is also leakage. That is also reduce consumption. So consumption minus the tax. So leakage is saving, import, and tax. Tax also reduce potential consumption. So that is leakage. Injection, export, government purchase, and investment. So export, government purchase, and investment increase the production. If export increase, we should produce more. If government purchase more, we should produce more. If we invest, we produce more. But if we saving, we produce because of saving, we are not producing. We don't use that money here. So, and import in other country product. So taxes, government take money, then consumption decrease. So that is leakage, injection. So at the equilibrium, this saving plus import tax equal to the export plus government purchase and investment. So at the equilibrium, no planned inventory changes because saving equal leakage. But other points, if the real GDP more than the equilibrium GDP, saving more than the spending, then there will be a unplanned changes in inventory. So inventory level goes up. if the real GDP more than equilibrium GDP. So unplanned changes in inventories, then they will cut down because inventory level goes up, then reach the equilibrium. If the real GDP less than the equilibrium GDP, then more sale, then say spending more than the production. So more sale, then inventory go down, then they will produce more, then reach the equilibrium. So we will study that recessionary expenditure gap and inflationary expenditure gap in the tomorrow. So tomorrow you will have class 7:30 or 7 o'clock. Okay, I will send the link. Students.
Okay.
Okay, we will stop here. Tomorrow I will send the link night class because tomorrow meetings or daytime we cannot have. So 7 o'clock or 7:30 I will send the link. Okay. Okay, students, you check the LMS.
Okay.
Your LMS. I will today I will add some more in your LMS. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.